Citizens must not hide their travel or contact history as authorities deal with the pandemic. With any big crisis comes great responsibility. In this time of a pandemic, while there is extensive proven value in adopting recommended personal hygiene standards, maintaining physical distance, and demanding the state and center provide adequate facilities for testing and treatment of the ill, it is also essential to leave that word on the top of the pile: responsibility. Every public health emergency requires community recognition that this is an extraordinary set of circumstances requiring far from ordinary responses. A reasonable restriction on citizens' rights may come into play on invoking provisions of the Epidemic Disease Act. State police are already slapping cases on violators of the lockdown conditions. Action is also being taken on those who violate quarantine. However, the strongest weapon that one can unleash against the pandemic is with every individual. The time to say this nicely is over. It is time to insist that every individual respond responsibly during this time. To inform authorities of relevant history of travel, stay in quarantine even if asymptomatic, follow all other protocols. Keeping health authorities in a loop could make the difference between life and death. Individuals volunteering information will help the central and state governments narrow down on the cluster cases centered around the Tablighi Jamaat conference in Nizamuddin, Delhi. The spread of cases from this one spot, which reportedly had several foreign nationals who later tested positive and where 6 among those who attended died, has emerged as a key milestone in India's management of the epidemic. The conference was held on March 13, more than a week before the Sunday lockdown. Since then, people from the conference moved on back home, and several, including Indonesian nationals who were present at Nizamuddin, have tested positive. While the state has deployed hotspot containment strategies in Ground Zero in Delhi, it is the people who have spread out in the community that are absolutely crucial over the next few days to shaping one stretch of the course of the epidemic in India. While it is a massive exercise to track down all the attendees, it is now believed that thousands of people were present, and each of their contacts, it must still be done. Some states have already expressed being thwarted without cooperation from the participants and their close contacts. Unfortunately, this may leave the job half done or undone, leading to disastrous consequences. It is indeed a Herculean task, and may even be considered impossible unless those who went for the meeting in Delhi step up themselves, engage with the health authorities, submit themselves to a test, and remain under quarantine for the prescribed period. Humanitarian crises such as pandemics invoke the worst among men and women, but also their best. The latter is eminently possible as long as people believe that the enemy is the pandemic and act responsibly. Okay, आज के words हैं step up, pandemic, provisions, slapping cases, quarantine, unleash, asymptomatic, narrow down, key milestone, deployed, ground zero, attendees thwarted, a Herculean task, prescribed and eminently. तो इन वर्ड्स को आप कहीं पे लिख के इनका मीनिंग लिखेंगे और मुझे एज असाइनमेंट भेजेंगे. So let's start reading this. Step up. You'll tell me why this is the heading of this article, or what's the significance of writing step up here. Okay. So citizens must not hide their travel or contact history as authorities deal with the pandemic. The contact history होती क्या है? Every person that you have met in the past few days is contact history. Travel history is every place that you have traveled to. So citizens must not hide all these details of where they traveled or whom they contacted as authorities deal with the pandemic. Now, what is a pandemic? Pandemic is something that has spread everywhere. That is you can say ubiquitous. That is present everywhere now. An epidemic that has got out of control is a pandemic. अब epidemic क्या होता है? Epidemic is something, some disease or something bad that happened to a lot of people at the very same time. When many people are affected by a disease at the very same time, it is called an epidemic. Whereas if the same disease spreads to every part of the world, it is a pandemic. Pan means everywhere, alright? So hence pandemic. With any big crisis comes great responsibility. In this time of a pandemic, while there is extensive proven value in adopting recommended personal hygiene standards, maintaining physical distance and demanding the states and center provide adequate facilities for testing and treatment for the ill, it is also essential to leave that word on the top of the pile, responsibility. लंबा लाइन है, तोड़ तोड़ के समझते हैं. चलिए. So in this time of a pandemic, clear है? While there is extensive proven value in adopting recommended personal hygiene standards, it has been proved कि अगर आप personal hygiene standards maintain करते हैं तो it will be good for you. Maintaining physical distance and demanding the states and center provide adequate facilities for testing and treatment for the ill, इन सब के बावजूद it is also essential to leave that word on the top of the pile. All the pile क्या होता है? Pile is any pile of stones होता है जहाँ पे बहुत सारी चीज़ें एक साथ इकट्ठा होती है, ठीक है? So pile. So the pile of all these things, one thing needs to be kept on the top of the pile, and that is responsibility. मतलब they should be given the most priority. Every public health emergency requires community recognition that this is an extraordinary set of circumstances requiring far from ordinary responses. Desperate times need desperate measures. A responsible restriction on citizens' rights may also come into play on invoking provisions of the Epidemic Diseases Act. Provisions क्या होता है? Provisions are basically all the facilities or whatever rules and regulations have been set in this act. State police are already slapping cases on violators of the lockdown conditions. Slapping cases like you're किसी पे केस फाइल कर रहा है, ठीक है, FIR चार्ज हो रहा है किसी पे. On violators are those who violate, those who break rules of the lockdown conditions. Action is also being taken on those who violate quarantine. बहुत सारे लोग quarantine से भी भाग जा रहे हैं, alright? So action is also being taken on those people. However, the strongest weapon that one can unleash against this pandemic is with every individual. Unleash करते हैं तो you release your strength or your anger. Okay, so when you unleash a weapon, it means you are taking action. So however, the strongest weapon that one can unleash against the pandemic is with every individual. Now every individual needs to act individually to counter this pandemic. The time to say this is this nicely is over. और ये कहने का अच्छा तरीका जो था वो उसके लिए अब समय ख़त्म हो गया. Now people need to be very harsh about it and people need to follow what they need to do. So it is time to insist that every individual respond responsibly during this time. और वो किस तरह से करेगा, यहाँ पे ये कोलोन देकर दिया हुआ है. To inform authorities of relevant history of travel, ठीक है. Stay in quarantine even if asymptomatic. Now asymptomatic means one who is not showing symptoms. Symptom क्या होते हैं? Indications होते हैं, ठीक है. Like if something is wrong with your body and you get a fever is a symptom that you had ingested too much dust, or that you have a temperature difference in your body, so that is a symptom. Similarly तो basically asymptomatic means जब कोई symptom show ना कर रहे हो. तो ये भी पता चला है कि many of the coronavirus patients are asymptomatic. That means they do not show any symptom of coughing or temperature or dry coughs and all that, but still they have the virus in their body. So follow all other protocols. So basically कह रहा है, it is time to insist that every individual respond responsibly during this time, which is by informing authorities of relevant history of travel, stay in quarantine even if asymptomatic, and follow all other protocols. Keeping health authorities in the loop could make the difference between life and death. Even if you are asymptomatic, if you have a travel history, you're on quarantine and you're following all protocols, if you're keeping the health authorities in loop, that is in contact, it could make a difference between life and death. Okay, so individuals volunteering information will help the central and state governments narrow down on the cluster cases centered around the Tablighi Jamaat conference in Nizamuddin, Delhi. to narrow down is to basically reduce the amount of data that you have. Okay, so individuals volunteering information will help the central and state government. Those people who were possibly present at this Tablighi Jamaat conference in Nizamuddin, Delhi, if they volunteer information, if they give information voluntarily to the central and state governments, it will help to narrow down the cluster cases centered around this place. The spread of cases from this one spot, which reportedly had several foreign nationals who later tested positive and where 6 among those who attended died, has emerged as a key milestone in India's management of the epidemic. So till now we were seeing that everything was going okay, but suddenly this we got to know about this conference that was held, and many people from there have moved out who were infected. So this is a key milestone. Milestone as in this is something that will be remembered. Okay, it is an important event, you can say. The conference was held on March 13, more than a week before the Sunday lockdown. Since then, people from the conference moved on back home, and several, including Indonesian nationals who were present at Nizamuddin, have tested positive. While the state has deployed hotspot containment strategies in ground zero in Delhi, deploy कर रहे हैं मतलब किसी को कहीं पे पोजीशन कर रहे हैं, ठीक है. So while the state has deployed hotspot containment strategies, hotspot is any place where you get more than 10 infected cases of coronavirus according to the recent ongoings. So if you get more than 10 people who are infected, it's a hotspot. So to contain that spread of virus from that area, from that hotspot, needs strategies. So all those hotspot containment strategies have been deployed in ground zero in Delhi. Ground zero is you can say the epicenter, or the place where things initiated. Okay, it is the people who have spread out in the community that are absolutely crucial over the next few days to shaping one stretch of the course of the epidemic in India. You can understand if 1,000 people or more or less 1,000 people who attended this conference, if they move out to various places in India and are infected and come in contact with other people, how well this pandemic or epidemic can take shape in India. Okay, so while it is a massive exercise to track down all the attendees are all those who attended. It is now believed that thousands of people were present, and each of the contacts, it must still be done. Some states have already expressed being thwarted. Some states were fighting this to their entire strength, fighting the epidemic, fighting the pandemic. They were not letting cases in. They were doing tests, and cases were coming negative. So they were handling it pretty well, but all their efforts have been thwarted now, destroyed, without cooperation from the participants and their close contacts. Unfortunately, this may leave the job half done or undone, leading to disastrous consequences. इसका अंजाम बहुत बुरा हो सकता है. It is indeed a Herculean task. Herculean task is any task that is very difficult to do. Hercules was a very powerful Greek personality. So he needed strength. He had strength to do things, and if any work that required immense strength to be done, Hercules was called upon. So any task that is very difficult, that requires immense amount of strength to be done, is a Herculean task. Okay, it is indeed a Herculean task, and may even be considered impossible unless those who went for the meeting in Delhi step up themselves, engage with health authorities, submit themselves to a test, and remain under quarantine for the prescribed period. Prescribed is something that is prescribed, जो पहले से scribe किया हुआ, पहले से लिखा हुआ हो, so written or told earlier. Humanitarian crises such as pandemics invoke the worst among men and women, but also their best. दोनों हो सकता है. In times of crisis, you can either turn into a demon, or you can turn into an angel, basically. The latter is eminently possible. Latter is the best. Okay, in this statement, the latter is the best. Former would be worst. So the latter is eminently possible. Eminently possible कहने का मतलब है कि there are pretty good chances of that happening, as long as people believe that the enemy is the pandemic and act responsibly. As long as people believe that the enemy is the pandemic and not certain people, or people who who are blamed to be spreading viruses or all that. Basically, the author is trying to negate all or destroy all such arguments which say that certain people are trying to spread this disease. Okay, so basically, it is this line is to stop the blame game and to act responsibly. All right, the enemy is the pandemic, not any other person who is coming in contact with you. So we need to act responsibly to deal with this pandemic crisis. So this was today's article. These are the words that you need to write down in your notebooks. Write their meanings. If possible, make a statement out of them that is not in context to this article, and also write a short summary of this article in the assignment. So you have 2 assignments: word meanings, sentences, and a summary. Okay, thank you. Stay in, stay healthy, take care.